So there's been a lot I've been thinking my way through today, and I'm not entirely sure where to start. Um, but I got to start somewhere. So we're starting. Um, Yesterday I did not do a video, but it ended up being a good thing because, not that it matters one way or another, but for me, it was a good thing because when I was looking on my phone, when I was getting ready to get ready for bed, I saw that I had a comment on the day before video, right? And the comment was somebody who was apparently my first subscriber. And I remember starting out, he was encouraging me to do shorter videos. And it's like, no, that's not what I'm here for, right? I I didn't know what exactly my thing was, but I knew that I needed to do it my way, whatever that looked like. And if it was a long, ridiculous hot mess, then that needed to be what it was, because that was true to me, right? To where I was at the point I was doing the video. It was true to me in that space. And that is the most important thing about what I have been doing, right? Is that I remain true to me. And the entire journey has been me processing through, as I say regularly, this is my space to do my talk therapy. I process through things, make connections, make sense of things. I don't necessarily agree with anything I say from one video to the next. There are things that have emerged from this space that I have realized, like, I keep coming back to, like the shit with my family, and that my family has been largely the toxic thing that was blocking me from doing anything, right? So when I hit 40 and was looking at my life thinking, why the fuck do I have nothing to show for it? It all goes back to my family, right? And of course, I am aware that as I am less stuck in the lower energy spaces, then sometimes when things come up regarding my family, then it kind of sounds like, if your attitudes change this much, then how do we know they're really a problem, right? And that was basically the basis of the comment, right? So the video was regarding the 1-year anniversary of the death of my grandfather, and I spoke to the point in the video that I realized like 3 months before his death, I realized I had spent 33 years of my life mourning his death, and he still hadn't died. And I said, I will not mourn any longer, right? And that was 3 months before he died. And I carried that through. And at the funeral, I also mentioned, the only time I cried at the funeral, which if you've watched any of my videos, I cry a lot on this space. The only time I did that day was when I was in the truck with my cousins on the way to the cemetery, and I was pondering that point of, how am I the only one with this type memory of him, where I have nothing good to show for my connection with that man? The extent of the times that I had a good connection with him at all, it wasn't because of the connection. The good memory that I had of that space was, I stood up for myself. 444. And that was why it was the thing that I remembered fondly. That being when he got on my ass about how I was the one in the family who was always doing everything different, right? So I had, as he said, the line specifically was, why you always got to do everything different? You got two of the ugliest cats in the world, you got damn geckos, tattoos, and now you're going to do a motorcycle class. And I stood up for myself, the only time with that man I ever did, and I said, my sole purpose in life is to piss you off. And he didn't know what to say, right? And I was proud of myself because I actually stood up for myself. And like I said, that's the memory I have that's fond dealing with my grandfather. And it's not because of my grandfather. It's because that was the one time I stood up for myself to that man. Now, I appreciate the fact that, yes, my family is without my mother is without her father for a whole year now. And her sisters as well, and my grandmother. I can appreciate that fact, sure. Don't really give a shit, because the man was a toxic, abusive nightmare. And then, when I get that I am not, when I am, my speaking is not my strong suit. I am much better at writing, and when I get on a freaking roll, then I can make it make sense. When I'm talking, it's not that great, because my entire life revolved around my grandparents and my parents using guilt and shame to control my behavior, right? And the biggest thing was I was not supposed to speak because it made people uncomfortable, right? Because I could call them out on things that they were saying that weren't lining up with their behaviors, and asking as a child genuinely trying to make sense of the world. I don't know if I said that right the first time. But in return, what they gave back was that I needed to be silenced, right? So they were going to do that in whatever means that took, which was largely guilt and shame, and didn't matter if there was any kind of basis for it or not. The extent of their need for saying and doing the things to squash me down was so they retain their control, and I don't get out of line. The past 2 years, I have spent my time doing this thing that I felt like I was supposed to be doing, which is this YouTube channel. And it has been my talk therapy, because there has never been a safe space for me to process all of the shit that I've just been carrying my life, right? And so that's what this became. And there has been a big part of me that, and I've talked about this on here a lot too. I preferred doing the longer videos to give people less access to me. I preferred doing the longer videos knowing that that would turn most people off, and that most people would not continue to listen to what I had to say because it was a long video. Because who wants to piss away an hour and 45 minutes listening to some random girl on the internet bitch? And yet it always starts with something like frustrating or irritating at the start of it, and then kind of meanders from there. And where it goes, I never know where it's going to go. I know, today, I know there are certain things I want to talk about, but I don't know that I'll get to all of them. And I don't know that I'll convey any of them clearly. That's the joy of me speaking, because it was I was never supposed to. I was not supposed to speak because it made people uncomfortable. I was not supposed to speak because they didn't really want to know what I had to say. Especially if in any way it made them look bad. Or it made them look at what they were doing. That was a big one too. They didn't want to see what they were doing as a problem. They just wanted to continue doing whatever they were doing, right? So, sometimes the titles don't necessarily... I don't love coming up with titles. I watch every video that I do after I do it, before or as I'm putting it on my computer to load it on YouTube. That is when I try to make sense of everything that I talked about, see if there's anything I got to clarify or clarify or correct myself on, or whatever, right? Because misspeaking is something that I struggle with, because that wound around using my voice, which has always been there, is still there. It is still something that I struggle with. But the point of doing the thing in spite of all the difficulties that come with it is also a necessary part of the process. Anyway, so there was a lot of bitching about my family because it's standard, right? My fucking channel is The Family Disappointment. I have had people in the past ask me why I'm the family disappointment. And that is exactly the point, because I always took it as this big personal issue that there was something wrong with me because of how my family has always treated me, right? And does that mean we've never had any good moments? No. But the majority of what I have to go back to is shit. And part of the reason I have struggled with dealing with so much of this stuff is because, like the comment that came up yesterday of, are they really that bad? They just seem like normal folk. That is the same goddamn thing that kept me gaslighting myself my entire life, because I also saw the good times. Or the times that sucked less. But it didn't change the fact that I still made it to my fucking 40s before I really started being able to figure out what the fuck was going on and why I couldn't have more of a life than I've ever had, right? And for a long time, I would say that, it's how do you get to be 42 and have nothing to show for it, right? But then I had somebody call me out on that in a video at one point in time, and she said, you're giving a voice to those of us who haven't been able to put the words to it. So I stopped saying it. Because I know that is one of my biggest purposes in this space. However fucked up and disastrous it might sound at any given time, or however I might revert back to I don't even know. So last night, I get this comment, and I go to respond. A little intuitive voice chimes in saying, you don't owe him a response. And so I set it aside. But then I found myself on Instagram dissociating just by aimlessly scrolling through. I found a new page or a new person to follow on there and was getting into their videos. And so that was basically my little way of dissociating at the moment. Was just lose myself in somebody else's stuff, in somebody else's videos. And then I realized I was doing it again. Yeah, so I go, get ready to, or go get more ready for bed. And I go back in there. And then I do the same thing on fucking YouTube. It's just new creator, and suddenly there were like two new people I followed on, or I was looking at their videos. I don't even know that I think I followed one, but not the other. But I was just getting lost in their little shorts, right? The little short videos they had. And once again, it's like, you're doing it again. And so I decided I was going to try to go to bed, right? Put the phone down, try to play the meditation music, and end up just crying. This whole stupid thing, right? Before I put my phone up, I did try to respond one more time. And again, that intuitive voice had to chime in and say, you do not owe him a response. And so when I put the phone down and try to go to sleep, it didn't happen. Instead I'm just laying there crying and thinking about things, all about everything, right? Because it goes back to that same damn thing. That is the exact same thinking that kept me gaslighting myself my entire fucking life. So when something with the family was blatantly, obviously a problem, and this is not right, then something else would come along and remind me that, they're not so bad. They're not doing this. It could always be worse. And maybe they have hit you in the past, but they're, maybe not. That's not the response to everything. So is it really that bad? All the different ways that I've ever gaslit myself because I could see that maybe they weren't all bad, right? Fucking light. Anyway, I end up having these random thoughts going down the rabbit hole again, right? So, one of the new creators, the Instagram creator, he had a video where he was talking about being an NCO in the military, and it was a response to some kid basically making a fool of himself, talking about his military something or other, but clearly being a little douchey twerp. And the way that the guy was speaking to him and everything, right? But I have this little visual thing come up where I see myself in this other space where I'm in this shared, it's like a party or something, and this creator is there and I'm talking to him, and for some reason the military stuff comes up, and like somebody else had told him that I was in the military or whatever, and I went back to like I normally do with the whole military thing. I have a very love-hate relationship, mostly on the hate side of my time in the military. So then I was thinking through this, right? And what it amounted to was like this guy's comment. It was just all these different layers of ways that I have self-betrayed in my lifetime. Because I could see the good in somebody or the wound that they were moving from, so that rather than holding the issue against them, I turned it on myself and figured, why the fuck do I exist if I cause this much of a problem for everybody, right? Let's start the car sketchily. But ultimately, the whole point was, this is a self-betrayal thing. So when I initially felt bad because this guy said something about, are they really all that bad? They seem like just normal folk. I saw the ways that I rationalized that very point to myself, when essentially gaslighting myself away from being able to realize how damaging their behavior actually was. I will say, luckily, when I was kind of struggling with this point of the guy's comment and just realizing that is exactly how I've gaslit myself over the years, I came across this Jerry Wise video, and he was talking about, I don't remember how many, I want to say like 10 weird behaviors of adult children of narcissistic parents or something to that effect. But anyway, when I was, I clicked on it and watched through the video, and it's like, I needed that. I needed the reminder that just because they seem like normal to everybody else, or other people want to buy into the bullshit illusion of the big happy family, when in reality it's nobody's living authentically because they grew up in an abusive situation, an emotionally abusive situation where they were unable to be themselves. And so nobody is truly being their actual self. They're being the muted down version of what was okay for them as daddy allowed them to have, their whatever ideas of who they were, right? One of the most irritating things for me is this whole talking thing. Because the way I talk, with mostly confusion and questioning myself and half the time not being able to organize a clear thought amidst other clear thoughts, that's because there was so much trauma around using my voice, right? So when you're never allowed to speak and you're never allowed to ask the questions to learn and make sense of what's going on in the world, because you're a problem, because you're noticing things that they don't want you to notice, it gets very difficult to be able to speak. But that too is something that you fucking work through it, but it's a pain in the ass. But then just thinking about every time that I've tried to, okay, like when reading in school, I always hated that. Because basically it's like, okay, like I talk. That stammering thing where it's like, it's not a stutter, but at the same time, I get tripped on my words. That's always been there. So then when I'm forced to be in these situations where I have to read in class or whatever, and then I'm tripping over my words, I feel stupid. Because that's how I was supposed to feel. Because that's what my family wanted, right? Because my grandfather was the only person who was supposed to be smart, right? And so he bullied everybody into thinking they were idiots. And, his, as I've said on here many times, his main, the one thing he went, or one of the things he went back to the most was, you got a brain in your head, use it. But it was always done in a way to diminish the person that he was speaking to, because that's what bullies fucking do. And my parents too. They've done that plenty of times, because there too, my mother was in this energetic agreement with my grandfather that I had to be stopped, that I was a problem. So they set in real hard on me, right? I was the scapegoat. That was my role. The black sheep in the family, the one that was going to be a problem, because I couldn't just conform to the stupid shit, right? Let's go back to that the bit where, my grandfather commented that I had two of the ugliest cats in the world. You know what that was? That was because they were the ones that weren't white. Because my great-grandmother she said, okay, she claimed she could only do it when they were wet, when they were brand new, but they would selectively off the ones that weren't white. So add that in to your problematic behaviors along the line, because there are a whole lot of things like that amount from this whole stupid white supremacy bullshit. And yes, my grandfather is very much, that type. I've talked on here several times about, I was the one that would get after him because he would complain about black people on the TV. It's like, they exist. Just because you don't want to see them and don't want to think that they exist, that's a you problem. But the ones that I had, I was always into the unique things, the ones that stood out in some way and were different. So like when it came to only having the white cats around, I liked the ones with the little gray spot on their head, because it was something different. But if I found, because I was little when my great grandfather died when I was 7. So we spent a lot of years going out there just about every weekend. If I found the kittens before my grandma did, she couldn't do it. Because then I knew they were there. I knew they existed. However, that does make me wonder if, because there were still surprisingly few of them. So she said she could only do it when they were still wet, as far as, snapping their necks or whatever. But, it's like there was a little bit of time where there might be some that were different, but then what happened to them? I know when she moved back up here, there was a Siamese cat that had come along in the group, and it had been born on the farm. But, like I don't remember there being that much variety otherwise anyway. So, I don't know. But like the fact that I could even make that connection of, and it wasn't immediate. It was a question as to why are there only white cats on this farm, because there were a ton of cats. But at the same time, I was 7, right? Or 7 when it was over. But yeah, like the one cat that came back up here when my grandma moved, or we moved my great grandma closer to us. She was like a 1.5 miles away. Was a Siamese. So that was a different one. Left all the white ones behind. What happened to all those? Right? But when she came back, she had Tink, little Tinkerbell. But yeah. But when he got after me about having 2 of the ugliest cats in the world, it's because the ones I liked were the tortoiseshell colored. So like Tigger was mostly black and orange, but she had a little bit of white on her. And then Sassy was like black and brown, but it was like the mottled coloring and whatnot. And they had a matching toe. They had like one foot that was like Sassy's was black and Tigger's was white, but it had the same little orange or brown toe. But like I was the one that noticed the weird things like that because I liked the different things. I liked the quirky things that made the things different, right? So like the coloring, when it's all bright and colorful, or when there are options. I liked the things that were different. And I think largely because I never fit, right? I'm trying to figure out. I know that like I wrote a big long spiel. Like I couldn't sleep. I just kept crying last night because I had like all these different things running through my head, and I'm trying to even remember or see if if I completely missed anything that I was wanting to talk about. Yeah, the self-betrayal thing, right? So, okay, the military thing. I talked about having the vision, talking to the one creator that I started following last night, and had a video where he talked about being an NCO, and he was kind of making fun of some little dipshit making an ass of himself. Excuse me. Okay, so what I wrote was, I mentioned my 2 concussions in basic training that went unreported, but then the one at home was the one that ended my military career eventually. And I mentioned the time in basic training when the dude felt like he had some sort of right to touch me in the freaking formation. And because in that moment my thought was, who the fuck even cares, right? Because what me caring didn't matter enough to me, or at that point, right? The fact that somebody had freaking violated me in this formation, and I thought, what's the point, right? Or who the fuck cares, right? So fine, lean back, right? But then the next day when it's clear that they've been talking shit about me in the fucking barracks, right? Because, he just wanted to, thought he had some kind of right to lean his shit up against me. So, and then I leaned back because who the fuck cares, right? Because that's what I had been conditioned to believe, is who the fuck cares, right? Nobody's going to do anything. Nobody's going to save your ass. Nobody gives a shit. And yet you still have to wait on somebody else outside of you to save you, right? You have to have you have to have this Jesus figure come and save you because you can't do it on your own. But that's not the point of what Jesus came for. Jesus came to show that you can do the healing work necessary, and you must, in order to get to this other way of being, in order to truly live, right? But, that was like one of the biggest frustrations I had along the way. Like when I got baptized, it was because I had all this suicidal ideation and I needed it to go away. I wanted it to go away. I didn't know how to make it go away. So I went to fucking church and it made it worse. Because it never went away. Because the point isn't somebody fixed it for you. The point is, as much as it fucking sucks, you have to go through that shit and process through it to get it out of your system. And I don't know if it ever fully goes away. I will say that when there aren't these stupid comments coming up to try to pull me back into gaslighting myself, I feel like I can actually, like, I have a capacity to receive love from others that I could never receive before, right? Through people saying or doing the nice things just because they wanted to, right? So whether that's saying something nice or doing something nice for you or whatever, right? It's when somebody says or does something nice for you and your immediate response is to diminish it because you cannot receive love, that also, that negatively affects, to some degree, the person that's trying to give you love because you're rejecting it, right? So whether it's just the saying the nice thing or whatever the fuck else, anyway. So the dude in basic. And what I've realized, if I hadn't leaned back, that guy wouldn't have said anything. Because what would there be to share? That you could touch this person and they don't respond because you're in fucking formation and you're not supposed to be doing that shit. But then you respond thinking, who the fuck cares? And then everybody latches right onto that. And then everybody's looking at you like they know something about you, right? That same damn thing with my grandfather. He knows something about you, right? That man is fucking ridiculous. I'm not even gonna go into that. Anyway, I've talked about that whole experience with the basic training thing on here multiple times. And it took a lot for me to get to the point of realizing that part of the issue was if that guy hadn't said anything to anybody else in the barracks or whatever, he would have had nothing to brag about, right? Like, because I leaned back in this moment thinking, who the fuck cares? It gave him something to talk about. But I'm pretty confident not one goddamn male in that space said, what made you think you had the right to touch her? And that is exactly I think what keeps so many of us from saying anything, right? Because every woman has a story about somebody who got out of line or was inappropriate. And one thing I did write down is, to his point of, were they really all that bad? They sound like normal folk. That is the same exact logic that asks the fucking rape victim what she was wearing. Because you're gaslighting away from there ever having been a problem. You might not have known the whole problem, which, I mean, he's been mentioned he was my first follower on here, but obviously doesn't watch my videos, except for that one came up and happened to have this thing, right? But that same exact, the thing that gave him the space to think that, or to say the thing, the space to say the thing that is essentially the very thing I used to gaslight myself my entire fucking life. That is the same goddamn energy that keeps people from ever speaking up when there's a problem. Because it is essentially a denial of the problem. Hold on, I got my nose. Okay. It is the same fucking system that lets your pedophiles and adulterers preach to the congregations, right? While they're actively abusing children, right? In that time frame, they can still be up there preaching a sermon to the congregation, the pedophiles and the adulterers, and turn around, and when they get caught, because that's the only way it comes out, is when, they get caught with, their smut on their computer, age inappropriate shit that they're watching because they're creepy, dirty, nasty old men, and they get busted, then they go tell their sob story to the congregation, and I'm so sorry, I'm just a sinner, and blah blah blah. The same, okay, going back to that adulterer point, right? So I know of one scenario in which the pastor was caught having an affair with somebody in the congregation, I think the secretary or whatever, and when it came out, he got to go tell his sob story at the front of the church and boo-hoo his way into forgiveness, and they turned their rage against the wife, right? Because, she wasn't taking care of her man if he needed to go get involved with somebody outside of their connection. The same fucking energy that allows rapists to get off the hook for being busted raping an unconscious victim, but he has a life, a promising future ahead of him. Not like that. Fuck that. Is the full out lack of accountability that we have been taught is Nobody's ever going to be, to have to come to terms for the wrong that they've done. So what's the point of saying anything? The point is, they're fucking a whole lot more of us over than any of us realize. Let's go back to that thing that helped me get out of okay, the flip side of the point. Okay, I mentioned when I was in the process of leaving my ex, and then there was the Keanu Reeves thing that came out, and he did something like really nice for some people on a flight, right? On a flight that they were supposed to be on. Something happened, and he bought paid for a van or whatever, and they all rode together, right? He did something nice, right? Whereas I was living with my ex, who is a royal dickhead, telling me, on every other daily basis or whatever amount, that he should have raped me when he had the chance, and that kind of dumb shit. Or he saw himself getting so angry he could see himself accidentally killing somebody someday. It's the same goddamn energy, right? For what my ex would do, right? Anyway, that wasn't the point. Going back to the Keanu thing. The thing that came up as I was looking at the situation with my ex and seeing all this stuff with this person that did something nice for other people because he's not a dick. And what came to mind was, if there is one, there are more. Those are your people. Find them. Right? So whatever kind of clusterfuck of a storytelling adventure I go on, that's how I'm going to find my people, damn it. However, that doesn't mean the assholes aren't still going to come around and try to put me back in my place, right? Or gaslight me. Out of what I know to be true. And going back to that, I mentioned the scenario with the visual of seeing me talking to this, former NCO about my military experience, and talking about the, the two concussions, that I got in basic training that went unreported because I was trying to not make waves. I was trying to do the right thing, not get in trouble, not get any more attention drawn to me. So, they definitely, the drill sergeants, at least one, saw me trip and crack myself in the head with the rifle. But she saw me trip. I don't know that she saw me necessarily hit myself in the head with the rifle, but she saw me bleeding afterwards. But that was the extent of it. I got told to fall out and go get cleaned up, and I never said anything because I didn't want to bring unnecessary attention to myself. But then the fucking TBI that I get outside of the military is the one that ends my military career. And since there's no documentation, prove it, right? So, and there were two during basic training, and there were witnesses, right? So the one was when I tripped, hit the butt stock of my rifle on my thigh, and cracked myself in the head with the sight post. And people saw the trip, but that was the extent of it, probably, other than me bleeding and being told to fall out later. But then the other one, there was definitely an audience for that one. We were with our platoons, and we're having a little, the time where we debrief and talk about things that need to be covered in a smaller group setting. And, so if there are any questions, then we can get those answered. Or if we need supplies like toilet paper, then those can get divvied out at that time too, right? Because you got to ask the drill sergeants for that stuff. And in that time, the one drill sergeant that I like to say is a mean version of my older brother, he played college baseball. And it was this big game for him to pitch the toilet paper to whoever wanted him to pitch it to him, right? They were just, how fun it is to catch the pitched toilet paper. And when I looked at him, he was looking the other direction. So I decided to go over to where my battle buddy, or one of my battle buddies, was to ask her a question or whatever. I don't remember. I think we were doing some paperwork for the end of, or to get ready for family day or the end of the thing, whatever. And since I thought he was looking that way and I went that way, apparently he was trying to pitch it to some guy that was over here while he was looking over there. And since I didn't know that, I took it to the head, right to the temple. And I had my eye pro on, so it was like right there. And it brought tears to my eyes because it fucking hurt. Because, okay, how fast is a fucking pitcher throw the damn ball, right? Good 80 at least. I'm assuming he's probably pretty good since, he still plays, he's like with the Army League or whatever, or I don't know what they do. I know he's been playing with the Army for some time, but that was several years ago. This was 2011, right? But there again, lots of people saw it. There was even a resounding ooh when they saw me get it in the head. Nobody asked if I was okay. So yet again, all those layers where we're taught to self-betray, right? And, it might not be something obvious. It might just be as simple as, are they really all that bad? I've spent the past 2 years trying to sort through all the shit with them. I don't care if somebody else believes me or not. But it's fucking irritating as hell when it's just another thing that comes up to essentially give me the opportunity to, to gaslight myself again. What are you going to do? How are you going to react? With everything you know now, how are you going to react? Anyway, it was like 4:30 when I finally was able to talk myself down enough to being able to sleep. I had to write and get it out of my system before I was able to actually fall asleep, because otherwise I just lay there and thinking. Oh, that's one. I just saw it. All the times where I got to be around men trash talking women because I was in a space that was perhaps male dominated, like military, right? Or drumline, which, I mean, kids, but still. But like there's one specific time in basic training. I think we were going into graduation, and we were all lined up, and because me and there was this other girl that was around my height, I think she was a tiny bit shorter, we're back there with the men, right? With the dudes. And just by the fact that we're taller than the average female, Because now I like to say it more average tall, because I know a lot of people that are taller than me. A lot of women that are taller than me. So, it's like, while I'm taller than a lot, not by any means among the tallest. So I'm like 5'8.5", right? But it's put me, like, especially, like, even for pictures, for different organizations through school, right? That put me back there with the guys because I was taller, right? Because you gotta get situated by your height, right? Shortest to tallest. And so it was pretty common to be around douchey dudes trash talking girls. And because I wasn't trying to draw attention to myself, because, I got bullied at home bad enough, why did I need to draw any more attention to myself by saying something about the fuckers that I was standing around in school or in freaking basic training, right? So, to try to keep the peace. But there was one day in basic training, when we're all lined up and waiting to do the thing, and the guys are trash talking the girls, and one guy looks over and says, "Sorry, Jones," and I don't even remember what all he said, but I remember that much. And my self-betrayal of the moment was, I'm used to it. First off, what kind of shitty existence is it that's the first thing? I'm used to it. That just means there's a whole lot of douchey dudes thinking they have access to, to touching the girls because they want to, right? So, like, and then why, fucking sexual assault and rape are so common in the military. Because it's a space where you're told that this is supposed to be here and that is not supposed to be here. But since that wants to be over here with the this, then game's on, right? So while it shouldn't be permission to touch anybody the way that you want to, it seems to be that way, which I think is precisely the point of the system, especially with the whole, like, grand scheme of things, politics and religion as the world's oldest fuck buddies, right? Because the system that is set up is women are less than men, right? So, because women exist, they need to just expect that this behavior, this shitty behavior from the douchebags in the world, is possibly going to happen. And because the douchey pastors that have assaulted God knows how many children and, other, cheated on their wives with who knows how many other women in the space, but they have some sort of power, so they get away with it. And all they got to do is go boo-hoo-hoo up in front of the church, and then suddenly everybody's, feeling sorry for them, and, oh, I forgive you, pastor, and blah, 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 that fucking bullshit. While his wife is getting demonized, right? Because she's not doing enough. It's the same fucking energy. Oh, I talked about a lot of things going. It's not that they're necessarily wrong per se, but really aggravating today. Okay. That one's not from today. The other day, I went to change the blades on the windshield wipers and the back window wiper. And the back window wiper shattered. Like, this is a 2008. The piece holding it on is like all rusted and like it's dead, and it died. And like there were the pieces, like, you know, kind of crumbled, and it's like I don't even know where everything went, but I put what remains in the door, like that piece. That's part of how it was attached on there, and then it died, and it's not going back up there. But I got the front ones on, and it was fine. But okay, my aunt wanted to go out for lunch today. All right, cool, whatever. So I was looking for the truck key. My dad's hiding it, right? Because he likes to make it inconvenient to use that one, because, well, there's this other vehicle that's, you know, perfectly good piece of shit, but it still runs. So while it runs and he can't drive the truck, except over to my grandma's house, you know, he still puts the key, or like, he has a new hook that he will hang the key on, but usually the key is going to be in his pocket somewhere. And there have been key fobs that have gone through the washing machine. That's hard on them. But after he took the truck the other day, he did put it on the hook, but it's not the normal hook that it was ever on. So it's like he's getting more intentional about being sneaky to keep me away from the truck, essentially. But can't fix the damn garage door opener because we got the panel, and I tried getting the plastic thing off of it because the battery's dead, and for like I couldn't get it on. Somehow it's stuck, and he's been supposed to fix it for a while, still not fixed. So the way to get the garage door down is either go out the front door or just jump in one of the cars that can't fit in the garage, right? Because we have no garage door openers. Which one of those is my fault? I actually accidentally tried to drive off when it was on the roof, and I forgot. And then it was nowhere to be found after that. But anyway, there was a whole lot of snow on the windshield, or like the car, right? The whole car. And it was like 4 inches of snow because it snowed and nobody's driven it, right? So my mom's parking in the garage, so there's been a couple times where if I'm running to the library or whatever, I'll just take her car because it's a little bit warmer because in the garage, excuse me. Since it's at an angle, I mean, it still had like probably 2.5 inches on it. But if it's powder, it's not a problem. It comes right off, right? I forgot that it rained at some point, so there was some ice in there. And so this happened. My fucking windshield wiper exploded. I was like, how the fuck? So there's 2 pieces of this. And there's another little piece around here somewhere. But it just like completely shattered. So I have one wiper on this, but luckily it's the one on the driver's side, so there's that. But fuck. But yeah, so that happened. And then okay, there was something else in there this morning that was really irritating. Well, I know this afternoon I was wanting to do laundry, and there was stuff that was forgotten in the washer and dryer. The towels that were in the dryer probably for a few days were still wet. Like nobody ever started them, which those are my mom's towels. They should have been started when she put them in there. You know, like all my stuff is separate. We don't share that task anymore because it was all falling on me, and I got tired of doing everybody else's shit, especially when my dad's gross. So yeah, so it's just like there was just all sorts of these things that were irritating. 2:00 this morning, my mom sends me a message. She had told some of my aunts and uncles, I think there's like a group chat with them, my dad's side, that she and my dad would go out to lunch today with their cousin Jenny, and that was the thing, right? 2:00 this morning, I got a message. Are you awake? I said, why? And she says something to the effect of, I think I should let you go tomorrow. It's like, no. No, actually, what I said was, or she said, I should let them go with you tomorrow, or I should let you go with them tomorrow. And I said, with who? And she, tells me about this thing that is apparently going on. She had mentioned it earlier, but that she didn't really want to go, but she said she would go anyway. And then she tells me at 2:00 in the morning she thinks she should let me go. And I said, send some money with Darla in his diaper bag and let them take care of it. Because I don't want to go. I wasn't asked. It was just posed like it was somehow doing me a favor because I get to spend time with this cousin that I don't even know. I mean, I've met her before. I know, I think around my undergrad time. Okay. When I was an undergrad, this is the first time I had any sort of experience where I remembered any of them. And it was her sister, Debbie. And it wasn't even a Debbie thing. It was, okay, I was going to school at Ball State. And it was my sophomore year. And I had this night where I was having these ridiculously painful cramps, like to the point my roommate was asking me if I needed to go to the emergency room. And I told my parents or my mom what was going on, because I was on my period, and it was really painful, like even more so than I was used to. And so they came up, and it turned out my dad's cousin Debbie was a doctor, or like a psychiatrist or something, but she could prescribe me something. I don't even remember much of that whole exchange, other than she got me some kind of painkiller for a little bit, but I did a follow-up with my doctor and ended up getting put on birth control for a while. And it was really bad, especially the first couple years when I was in the dorms. And I would be walking along with my roommate or whatever, and then just all at once be doubled over, almost on the ground, because it hurt so bad. So I think my doctor talked about how it's probably the ovarian cysts come up every month, and then as they rupture, then this can that's where some of that pain can come from or whatever. It's like, okay. So that was a pretty intense time. But that happened my sophomore year, and that was the first encounter that I had with her anyway. But then at some point it was like, because we connected, then there was also this other thing that it was probably my great aunt's birthday party that they ended up inviting a bunch of people. And that might have been the reason we knew about it, was just because we had connected to this one cousin that lived in Muncie. Yeah, anyway. But what was the point of that one? Oh, the cousin, yeah. So, my aunts, I know, have talked about spending time with them quite a bit, or the so-and-so's got this thing coming up or whatever, but I don't want to do that. They were nice people. I have no problem with them. But I wasn't the one that said I wanted to go. I didn't know it was a thing that was happening until it tries to get dumped on me. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And what it came out as was send Darla with some money for him and with a diaper bag and call it good enough. Because I ain't doing it. So of course, she's annoyed at me because I wouldn't cooperate on that. She's supposed to just, I don't want to go, so now you have to go do it. No, I did not make that commitment. So the little irritating things. I think I've seen some stuff that's talking about like this specific full moon that was like last night and whatever. Where like there's been talk about how basically the universe is lining you up to see, are you going to go back into the old ways or are you going to continue forward with what you know? So it's like there's been all these little things to try to pull me back into the old way of being. It's like, fuck no, I ain't going in there anymore. I didn't like that the entire time I was there. And as I'm processing through it now, I'm sure as shit not going back to that. So, yeah, but like just all this little tedium. But then there was this other thing. My aunt and I went out for lunch. And on the way back to her house, she wanted to stop at the gas station, right? So we pull in up next to the gas pump, because there was like nobody there. So we just parked there enough so she could run in and get her drink and come back. But she wanted to talk. She's suddenly in a talking mode. I mentioned when we drove past that there's a sign for, Piper, the lost dog, over by CVS, and she wasn't looking where, like, she thought I was talking about on the building. It's like, no, on the pole. And so we were having this conversation. Anyway, we get to the gas pump, and I think I said something about they don't care that the dog's missing. I said I think if anything, they're enjoying the fact that they're getting the attention of having a missing dog. And she started to agree with me, and then she like caught herself in the middle of it, and she stopped, and I said, it's right. And she was like, well, yeah. It's like, see? So it's like all these little things where, yeah, I think that's part of why I like spending time with this aunt specifically, is because she is seeing it when I talk about it. Like all sorts of things with the family and, the toxic dynamic with my grandfather and all that. She sees it, right? It's one of those things. It's where like going back to talking with my brother too. I had to be the one to see it and to say something. But once I started talking, then others started to see it. And I think ultimately that's like a big part of what I'm here to do anyway. And I think my family has been the, essentially the training ground that I needed to be able to come to trust myself in order to say the things that might not sound like they make sense, or that might be met with the people who are like, you're full of shit, you don't know what you're talking about, so they try to bully you into submission. Or to gaslight you with a thing of, are they really that bad? They just sound like normal folk. The problem is, normal is extremely toxic. Because it's what the system wants. The system is painting this illusion, and we're all part of it. It is the collective, right? We are all participating at some level, right? So like when I talked about when I first started the YouTube channel and I couldn't talk to my brother about it, it's because I knew he would have sabotaged it for me, and it wouldn't have been because he is a jerk or anything like that. It would have been because he was so conditioned by our family in the same way that I was, that had he known that there was something going on that I was doing that would potentially make the family look bad. That's how we were trained, was to stop that from happening, right? So my brother and I, while we have been each other's greatest ally, at least in these later years, we got each other in trouble a few times because we were afraid that if we didn't say anything about something, we would get in trouble, right? And yeah. So it's like we would rat each other out because it's what we were trained to do. But it was less considering the concern for one another and more focused on the concern of the family illusion. So we were trained to do that for the family. And largely, if we want to look at like world events and all that stuff, we have all been trained by the system that men are supposed to be better than women, and women are supposed to be quiet and submissive. We're not supposed to say anything because that makes people uncomfortable. And so we allow ourselves to be in abusive, toxic situations where we get hurt. We are taught to self-betray. We are taught to do the things to bring harm to ourselves and diminish ourselves to keep the peace, to be nice, to not be problematic, right? But this world needs some chaos now. It's time to shake the fuck up, right? Because the way things have always been is not good. And the fact that hundreds of thousands, if not more, and I'm going to say more, of us have been directly harmed by the system, right? In very, very many ways, right? It is time for it to change. And the only way it changes is through more of us that see it opening up and talking about what we're seeing and talking about our own personal experiences of being personally harmed by the shit that's been going on. So choosing not to fall back into the pattern of gaslighting myself because somebody asked me if they're really all that bad. Nobody's 100% bad 100% of the time. And to try to spin it so the person telling the story, who has been actively harmed by the whole situation in many ways and has spent 2 years talking through things about that whole journey, that whole gaslighting thing, that's got to go. And I think that's one of the things that's interesting too, is like, I watched another video where a bisexual creator was talking about going on a date with a woman versus going on a date with a man. And all the men were talking about, well, you just haven't dated the right one yet. It's like, well, stop letting it just be all shit out there, right? But it's like the ones that always want to say something, that is a part of that diminishing the, diminishing your experience, right? And it doesn't even matter that like almost all the women in those situations are like, or in those comments are like, yeah, this fucking sucks. All the dudes are like, well, you just haven't met the right one. That's not fair to generalize to everybody. Okay, bro. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. So as always, I appreciate you. Until the next time. See ya.